It's all about England, really, on the back pages. So, Sunday Independent Sports section, Southgate's modest approach dumps years of painful history, is their take. Paul Hayward on the front page. Now Gareth Southgate, like Bobby Robson, a gentleman of the dugout, has a chance to dry Gaza's tears at last and steer the country to the biggest game in football in Moscow on Sunday. Next up, we have the Mail on Sunday. Again, it's England roaring on. It's Harry Maguire celebrating and John Stones alongside him. England just one game away from World Cup final as Maguire and Ali book date with Croatia. We have the Telegraph. Obviously, it's in all the front pages of the news sections as well. So the Telegraph news section, top half is all England. It's Harry Maguire celebrating. Onwards is the headline. England march to semis. Then we have the Sunday World. Again, it's England. Harry on England. Again, it's Harry Maguire celebrating. Southgate's men closing in on glory. Then the Sun. World Cup quarterfinals. Sweden 0, England 2. Sweet dreams. Into last four, but Gareth wants more. Gareth Southgate carried England to the World Cup semi-finals and roared, "We're not ready to come home." Then we have the Star. Here we crow, sweet dream, as Southgate leads 3 lines to first World Cup semi for 28 years. Then Sunday Mirror Sport, again, World Cup quarter-final, Sweden 0, England 2. Sweet dreams are made of this. Brilliant England just 90 minutes away from 2018 World Cup final after quarter-final triumph is their take. The Sunday Times, as you can imagine. England again. Semi-precious. England to play Croatia in World Cup semi-final after 2-0 win over Sweden. And it's that picture of Harry Maguire steering away. He was in the stands 2 years ago watching England, and now he's putting them through to a World Cup semi-final. It's amazing what can happen in sport. And then the Mail we've done and the Sunday Independent we've done, and they are your headlines. And we have in studio here in Ballyliffin Dermot Gilleece from the Sunday Independent and his colleague Paul Kimmage. You're both very welcome. Thank you very much for making time. Apologies, I didn't have your microphones up. You're very welcome. Thank you for making time.
I'll thank you again, Joe.
There we go.
Thank you, Joe.
There we go. So there's obviously loads of coverage of England, and we'll get on to some of the World Cup coverage and the Tour de France opening weekend, and there's the death of William Dunlop, and there's some GAA and even some tennis. But I think it is worth starting with the golf. You've been here for the past week. Dermot, you've been at your fair share of these. You're writing about it today. Plenty of people are. Has it been a good week?
Oh, it's been a terrific week, Joe. The people have been most hospitable. The weather's been unusually kind, and the golf has been spectacular in places. Not all through, not from an Irish perspective, but generally speaking, it's been really exciting, really interesting.
Aside from being asked about Chris Froome at every turn, which we'll get to, how have you found the week, Paul?
Really enjoyable. Joe, really enjoyable. As a young boy, I first heard of this area when I was 8 years old, and it was through a film that was done on the Tour of Ireland that year, and an Irish winner, Paul Elliott, who was a brother of Seamus Elliott, and Paul Elliott won the Tour of Ireland that year. And the reference, the relevance to where we're sitting now is that one of the stages went over for the first time this famed Gap of Mamore, and the Gap of Mamore is probably the only climb on this island that has eluded me. I'd never actually ridden up it before, and it seemed strange to me that I would climb Alpe d'Huez, race up Alpe d'Huez in the Tour de France, and yet never ride up the Gap Mamore. But on Thursday morning at 7 o'clock I got up, and then the landlady I was staying with had an old bike out the back, and I borrowed it from her, and I rode out through the Naff and up the Gap Mamore and stood for a moment at the top, reflecting on where my life was and and where it was going and why I was turning round and cycling back to the Irish Open and not to the Tour de France, which I suppose is a kind of story in itself. But more than happy to be here. A real sense of being on holiday, a real sense, more than anything, of an event that has been embraced by the local people, by golf lovers, and just a tremendous effort by the people of Donegal, who've really done their county and done the event and done the golf course a brilliant service this week. It's just been a joy being on this golf course for the last few days.
Yeah. Dermot, in your piece you talk about this location, once referred to by John Hume as the Forgotten Peninsula. and it's been thrust worldwide into golfing consciousness by this Dubai Duty Free Irish Open, which is a nice way of putting it. And you're obviously out and about walking around, because you talked about just seeing the various scenes of people enjoying their ice creams and pushing their kids around, and a very kind of a festival feel to the whole thing is what you found, even if the leaderboard isn't quite what we would have wanted.
Yeah, you'll have to excuse me. I've just had a mischievous thought of Paul. I wondered if that bike was a tandem, and he and the landlady were doing the cycling together. Sorry, forget that. Sorry, Joe. What was that you wanted to know?
Well, I think we're all a bit thrown now.
Yeah, that's me. Don't mind me.
You were talking about the festival feel of the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, the weather has been the key, really, Joe. You know, but I think a hugely important aspect of it is that the European Tour have indicated that this has been the easiest Irish Open they've had to stage. They've staged in recent years, essentially because of the way Paul used the word, the way the locals have embraced it. I mean, at club level, at council level, the Gardaí. They've even been, you know, the PSNI on the other side of the border have been involved as well. And everybody has just rode in behind it to make it a memorable event. It's certainly one that I'm going to remember for a long time. Well, if God spares me a few more years. It's just been lovely.
Okay, that's interesting, because there is the other side, which I think Dennis Walsh in the Sunday Times and Philip Quinn have touched on to an extent, and they wonder if we hit some kind of ceiling here with the Irish Open. So, you know, Philip Quinn makes the point that as the third round unfolded, the rankings of the leading 8 players were 199, 124, 163, 153, 241, 581, 442, and so on in that vein. And he said, for all the progress made by the tournament since McIlroy took the reins, the Irish Open needs to take a long, hard look at itself, and questions need to be asked. For starters, is the current slot, a fortnight before the Open, conducive to drawing stellar names? And then makes the point as well that it's not the most accessible place, which is part of the story. And Dennis Walsh is just wondering, so, you know, similar kind of vibe. I don't want to misrepresent him. He's talking about a lot of the upsides as well, but does make the point that the field has been disappointingly shallow. Even though there were 2 players from the world's top 50, there were only 5 players in total from the world's top 50. Says, compare that to Royal County Down. We had 14 at Royal County Down when, as we know, Rory called in favours. So it's fantastic in so many ways, and it's come a long way from a decade ago. But I wonder, can we do more with it, or is this about the level it's going to pitch in at?
I'd be inclined to think that this is about as good as it gets. I mean, in terms of world ranking points, this is the biggest tournament in the world this weekend. It wouldn't carry as much money as the corresponding event in the States. The Greenbrier, I think it is, isn't it? We've John Rahm back defending the title. We've Rory McIlroy, who's world number 6. What more do we want? I mean, we had a couple of good years, really good years, when Rory really pushed out the boat at Royal County Down, and we had a very strong field at the K Club, and we had a good field last year. Justin Rose, I think, played last year. But I don't know. I've been around quite a while, Joe, in terms of Irish Opens. It started out by Carroll's, the sponsors, buying players, effectively. They paid serious appearance money. Tom Watson was Open champion, came to the Irish Open in 1975, and he got $25,000 for his trouble. And that was the way the thing operated in those early years. Seve Ballesteros, who was the number 1 European at the time, he was also paid handsomely for playing in it. Now, we don't have appearance money anymore because the European Tour, in their wisdom, and I think they're right, opted to put the money into the prize fund. They felt like it's quite reasonable to deduce from appearance fees and everything else that you're going to have a reduced prize fund if you're going to operate that way. They didn't want that, and now we have a straight up situation where you have $7 million as a prize fund, and the winner gets a sixth of that. And there are no appearance fees that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And that's the way it is. Now, if you want to change that, you're going to have to reintroduce, in my view, appearance fees, because it's not an ideal week. We know that. I mean, the ideal week is next week at the Scottish, which is a lead into the Open Championship. It's going to bring the Americans over. It's difficult logistically, I imagine, for Americans to come over, say, for this week, take a break, and then it doesn't make an awful lot of sense to do it that way. But it's a hell of a lot better than playing it in May with everything that has involved in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as with everything in golf, I defer to my colleague here, Dermot, and I'm pleased he brought up, made that point about the appearance fees, because I was about to prod him and say, well, what about back in the glory days of Portmarnock and Royal Dublin, when you'd got the great Americans coming over, and Seve and Faldo and Woozy and all these big names playing, and we don't have that this week.
And isn't an appearance fee to get a Justin Rose over far more valuable to everybody, bar the poor fella who finishes 98th in the tournament and makes however many grand less? Isn't that just better for the tournament to pay appearance fees? I would take Justin Rose over, and I no disrespect, they're all fabulous players. I go and watch any of them routinely when I just walk the course at random. But I'd take Justin Rose over 20 of the lads out there whose faces I don't recognise.
But that's not the way the tour is constructed, Joe.
I know that.
You know that perfectly well. You've been mischievous now. I mean,
I'm just saying we could lower the prize money that they're all getting. Because Keith Pelly's big sales pitch.
Is he being mischievous? I mean, Padraig is talking about, what do they call it? There's this phrase they use, is it hello money, or they didn't do what? He has some phrase for the appearance money. He used it recently. I was intrigued by it. So it's not as if, to use a well-worn phrase, it's gone away. You know, they haven't gone away, these appearance fees.
Oh, no.
They're still being given out.
Yeah.
And they're still getting the results for that. And, I actually agree with Joe that... it would definitely benefit. I mean, there's a paragraph from Philip's piece in the Mail, that really rang true to me. The Irish Open has always been at its most magnetic when the home fires were burning and the crowds get behind the local hero. Yesterday, amid the showers, there was a sense of a damp squib about Ballyliffin. I don't know how any of us around this table can deny that fact. Yesterday when Rory came in, there were streams of people walking off the golf course at a time when the leader was 14 under par, was 4 shots clear.
Yeah.
There weren't too many people going the other way. So that's the draw of player power, and that's what gets people excited. That's what gets them driving to places like destinations like Ballyliffin. They will make the effort to see the stars.
So, which would you prefer then, Joe? Would you prefer Padraig Harrington to have made the cut, to be up there in the top 10, say, going into yesterday and battling for the lead this afternoon, or would you prefer to have Justin Rose there at a price? I mean, had the Irish players shown any sort of reasonable form this weekend, you would have had an entirely different picture. The fact is they didn't, and Rory was particularly disappointing. And that's why we're focusing in on the absence of real sparkle in the field, because we didn't have anybody from the home group doing anything.
Yeah, sure, but Harrington competing and Rose being in the tournament aren't mutually exclusive.
They're not necessarily, but...
Like having a Rose is a nice safety net. Who knows Eric Van Rooyen?
But what if he misses the cut, like?
Jorge Campello. Look, there is only so far you can control what's going to happen on the course. I appreciate that. But I'm just saying, last year we had Matsuyama, we had Rose, we had Ram. He won't come back again, I wouldn't think, if he's not defending champion. There is a worry, if you don't dish out the hello money, let's call it, that you end up with the Irish lads and potentially not much else. I mean, McGinley's got that challenge next year.
Right, so who's going to pay the hello money?
I don't know who usually pays it. The sponsors?
Yes. But I mean, you have a rather complex sponsor situation here in this one, in that you have the overall Rolex series, which is clearly sponsored by Rolex. They put X amount of millions into the 7 tournaments that are so named. You have Dubai Duty Free. They do not put anything like the amount of money in that would allow you to pay appearance fees out of what they contribute.
Okay.
The home club here and the local community put up about $500,000. Falch Ireland would have done similarly. And that's it. There's your cake. Now, depending if you want to divide it in a certain way, I mean, what the European Tour, their primary function is to present golf for the benefit of the public with their own players in action. Now, the players come through the ranks through the prize money system. I mean, do you want a situation in which they're going to be picking up top prize money of, say, 250 or 300,000 euro, as you have in South Africa? Or do you want to give them serious prize money, even at a lower level, which will help them to stay on tour and to become star players ultimately? That's the function of the European Tour. Now, if you want spectacle, fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to get both unless somebody has very deep pockets and is prepared to spend that money. Carroll's had and did.
Okay.
But that day is gone.
Dermot, I want everything.
Well.
And I want it now.
Well, I think what you don't want is, again, from Pilla's piece, you know, the leaderboard, the world rankings of the leaderboard: 199th, 124th, 163rd, 153rd, 244th, 584th, 442nd, and 113th. You know, that's not a leaderboard that's going to inspire a lot of people to come out today or to drive up from Dublin. But you know, Dermot makes some really, really valid points. It's hard. It's a difficult balance. It's a really, really difficult balance.
Yeah, it's everything's definitely weighed in favour of the big players, that's for sure. As we depart the golf then, so still a brilliant week on the whole. The leaderboard hasn't worked out as we might like.
The great disappointment clearly has been the performance of the Irish players.
Yeah.
And I'll just finish with this. We wouldn't be talking this way, I'm sure, if Rory, Padraig, Shane, Graham, the rest of them were up there competing as we were quite reasonably expecting them to do.
Totally agree.
Can I ask a stupid question, Dermot? So we've got, you should say that the disappointment has been the performance of the Irish players who've grown up playing links courses, who've grown up playing in Donegal and all of their great links courses. And yesterday, as the hordes were coming in off the course following Rory to watch the World Cup, I actually walked the other way. I walked out to watch Eric van Rooyen, the leader, and I followed him for 9 holes. And, you know, I actually thought it was a good thing that there was still a good crowd out there. I thought it reflected really well on our public, on the golfing public, that they would come and still stay out there. But the stupid question is this. Van Rooyen said that the first time he'd ever played a links course was 2 years ago at the Dunhill.
Yeah.
You know. Now, our boys have grown up playing it. This guy has played for the first time 2 weeks ago. We have a really difficult links set up this week, and this guy is 4 shots clear. How does that happen?
Well, it happens because he's playing well, and because the nature of modern technology with the golf ball. Padraig Harrington, who is a bit of a student on this, will tell you that the golf ball nowadays behaves in such a manner that you can play on any terrain without very equally well, shall we say. I mean, a lot of the silly shots that were played out there over the last few days were because fellas decided not to think clearly. Rory decided on the tee that he was going to take the driver out and overpower the golf course. Now, Jack Nicklaus came over to play the Open Championship for the first time in 1962 at Troon. And Joe Carr told me that he consulted with Joe and talked with Joe about how you should actually play a links, what was different between it and the target courses that Nicklaus was used to in the States. And the answer was very simple, that there were holes in which you didn't need a driver. You took out a long iron or possibly a fairway wood to put the ball in play, and you then had to try and anticipate the movement of the ball. Instead of hitting it straight onto the green, you dropped it 30 yards short so that the ball would run up onto the green and hopefully finish in an attacking position. In other words, you've got to be switched on. Now, for some reason or other, Rory decided not to be switched on yesterday.
Did you make the point in your piece?
I don't know why.
That he hit 12 wedges into greens yesterday, which suggests a man who was taking the course on.
Yeah.
So, 30 putts yesterday, 34 the day before,
yeah.
32 the day before that. The most hackneyed and cliched of things we can discuss is Rory McIlroy's putting. But just give me a brief word on his demeanour this week and his relationship with that putting stick, and how severe now is the problem?
There is a serious problem there. I mean, I've spoken to a few pros out there during the week, and they worry seriously about his putting. I don't know what the answer is, but then again, it's not all putting, because as I've indicated there, he hit 12 wedges. Christy O'Connor used to say that with a wedge in his hand, he was disappointed if he didn't leave the ball around 6 feet from the pin. Rory was putting from 20 and 25 feet an awful lot of the time yesterday. That shouldn't happen with a wedge in your hand. So it's not quite as simple as attributing his problems to the flat blade, but it is certainly a huge part of them.
Have you seen much of him this week, Paul?
I followed him yesterday, and I think an important point should be made if we're going to acknowledge where the tournament is now is his contribution to that.
Absolutely.
He's made a huge contribution.
Absolutely.
And doesn't get the credit for it. I mean, I'm actually interested that in this new, Paul is taking over next year. Paul McGinley is taking over as the ambassador, if you want, for next year, and then I think Clark after that, and then Padraig. But they're only doing it for a year. He's done it for, is it 5 now?
4 years.
4 years now. Yeah. And then he's coming back in at the end of that cycle again.
Yeah.
And for someone who's much maligned for, not being Irish and not being a real Irishman, I mean, I find that really odd.
I know, you're right, Paul. I mean, I think what is overlooked, and is the key to the whole Rory contribution, is that Colin McLaughlin of Dubai Duty Free will tell you that but for Rory and but for a meeting with Rory in Dubai prior to the Royal County Down staging, he wouldn't have sponsored it. That he sponsored it purely on the say-so of Rory and Rory's commitment to play himself, first of all, which he has done dutifully, and to do his best to bring other players in. So Paul's right. He has made a huge and incalculable contribution. I mean, against that, we shouldn't really, to be honest, be attempting to downgrade the event because of the absence of top stars. Because Rory, there's a price to be paid for asking your friends to show up.
Sure.
And he alluded to it during the week, and he said there is a quid pro quo. I mean, the simple thing, Ernie Els played in Royal County Down, Rory had to go and play the South African Open as a consequence. So there's nothing quite simple in golf, at this level.
One last one. Either of you can give your opinion from afar. Someone suggested to me reasonably close that they just wonder if the fire has gone out, or certainly it's not comparable with what we saw from him 4, 5, 6 years ago. Do you pick that up in so much as you can from his demeanour, from his attitude on the course, from the snippets you see on the driving range, or is it too hard to say?
Having watched a little bit of him this week, I wasn't too concerned about his demeanour. He's mercurial. When he's on, and when he's not, he leaves it in neutral. And he used that phrase, I'm stuck in neutral.
Yeah.
What I was really interested in was his press conference on, was it Tuesday, Joe? And a kind of suggestion there about motivation and where he was at with that,
golf not being the most important thing.
That's exactly the phrase he used. Golf is not the most important thing. And you know what? I just wonder. I found that intriguing that he used that phrase, and I would actually. That got me thinking. Well, where is he now mentally now? And golf is not the most important thing. And if it's not the most important thing, I mean, I'm going to go out on this. What you don't see here, we've got beautiful sunshine, beautiful golf course. What you don't see here is the blood and guts that's out on that course. I mean, there's blood and guts all over it. That's what I love about the game. I mean, there are guys on that range now beating their brains out because they missed the cut this week, and shouting at their wives down the phone, and all sorts of stuff we don't actually take into account.
Yeah.
So Rory has won 4 majors. He's a world star. He's just got married. What happens next? Does he still have the same drive he had, 10 years ago? Probably not. Can he keep winning? Can he win the same way? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's at an interesting point in his career.
None of us know, Dermot. I'll give you final word on the golf and final word on Rory. We're at this interesting point now where I want to fast forward time up. I want to know where he finishes up. And none of us quite know. What's your gut feeling at this stage in comparison with 4 years ago when he'd won 2 majors in a row, a WGC in between, was 24, 25, had 4 majors in the can, and we thought it wasn't outlandish to look at double figures for this guy. You wouldn't back him to make double figures now.
I'm amazed at his apparent, I was going to say lack of ambition, but lack of intensity, for a 29-year-old. I mean, mind you, Lee Trevino, I'll just finish with this. Lee
Yes.
Trevino once said that when God hands out gifts, he never gives you everything. He always holds something back. And I think with Rory, God held back this intensity that great players like Nicholas had in an enduring manner. Rory doesn't have that. He, as Paul said, on a good day, he'll play brilliantly. If the mood's not there, he won't tough it out. Actually, it was put very well by a golfing friend of mine who said, "There's no grind in Rory," and I think that's the thing that, as Trevino indicated, that God held back.
Okay. So we'll leave the golf for now. It's Tour de France weekend. We should just touch on this other story firstly. Paul, I know you wanted to, so if you turn inside page 2 of the Sunday Independent, if you go across all the papers, the Mirror have a big piece in it as well. A third member of Dunlop bike family dies in racing tragedy. This really is just a dreadful story. This poor family. William Dunlop killed in a practice run at the Skerries 100 event. 32 years of age. He is father of one, expecting another child. So his father, Robert, killed in May 08, and his uncle Joey, the Joey, killed in 2000, both on bikes, all three on bikes now. It's just beyond awful for the family.
I
You
was
just
sick.
wonder.
I was almost physically sick when I heard about it. I heard about it last night, and I read the report in the Sunday Independent, the inside front page today. And I live quite close to that circuit, and I've cycled around it a couple of times. And you always know when the races are coming up because they put the bales up, and they've had some tragedy there before with a race doctor actually a couple of years ago, and I've gone by that spot. But the awfulness of this probably best summed up by Donald McRae. He was on Twitter this morning, and he put out a tweet. Michael Dunlop lost his brother William on his bike last night. 10 years ago, their father Robert died in front of them at the Northwest 200. Michael then won the race. His uncle Joey also died on his bike. So this is the fascination really about motorbike riders and road cyclists, road racers, and what they do, and the obsession. I mean, we talk about obsession in sport. I don't know if there's actually a more compelling obsession in sport than road racers on motorbikes. When you think of the danger. Don McRae actually interviewed Michael Dunlop in June, and he spoke about that moment back in 2008, 10 years ago, when both he and his brother William, who's just died, were practicing, in the same event. I'll just read you a little passage here. On May 15, 2008, Robert and his two sons, William and Michael, were practicing at the Northwest when the red flags came out. Eventually, Michael saw a man lying next to what's left of his bike. That's when it hits me. The man lying next to the broken bike is my dad. Sorry, that's a quotation. 2 days later, and defying the race stewards who declared that neither he nor his brother were fit to race, Michael got back on his bike. He wanted to honour his father by racing. The stewards are made to back down by a 19-year-old. The teenage Dunlop raced wheel to wheel against Christian Elkin and the great John McGuinness. It was a dramatic race with, as Dunlop suggests in his book, no love given, no love lost. I'm going so fast I don't know if I can stop. Dunlop won and the crowd erupted, in memory of Robert and in amazement at the grit of his son. For Dunlop, and this is a quote, "My head's full of tears. I've won the race, but I can't find any happiness in it. Tomorrow I bury my father." Now, what is astonishing is that already Michael has said the race is today. He wants it to go ahead. He's going to race, and he's going to go home and do exactly the same thing that he did to his brother or to his father 10 years ago. Yeah. He's going to go home and bury his brother. And it's just, I mean, we're here in kind of motorbike racing country, we're north of Ireland. I heard two of the lads in the press room talking about it and about William and the fact that he'd pulled out of the Isle of Man because his partner, who's pregnant at the moment, had been experiencing some difficulties in that pregnancy, and he hadn't wanted to race there, and he comes back and he, jumps on the bike yesterday, and it's just awful. It's just absolutely awful. And it comes back down to, why did they do it? What is it that compels them to put their lives on the line every time they go out? I mean, you look, Dermot, you'll remember the golden age of of motor car racing and of Formula One, and the guys like Jackie Stewart who jumped in cars that were effectively bombs.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah,
you have bombs with four-wheel bombs, and the danger and the awfulness of that. And
Jim Clark was a classic case, you know, that he died mainly because of the nature of motor racing at the time. I don't think we realise just how powerful these motorbikes are. I mean, if you take an ordinary road machine like, well, not an ordinary road machine, but you take a machine like a Ducati, which is the Rolls-Royce really of motorbikes, it's putting out about 180 brake horsepower, which is the same like as a 2-litre motor car. Now, you compare the weight of a motor car and what that engine has to push on a motorbike, you know, the potential for speed and disaster is there all the time.
Yeah.
It's
just
frightening.
on
And
that. So Michael Dunlop is the first rider in the history of the TT to go around the Isle of Man 33 miles in under 17 minutes.
Yeah.
That's an average speed of 133.9 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, I've raced around the Isle of Man, you
On
know,
a winding circuit.
and it's an incredible circuit, and that is mind blowing.
Yeah.
An average speed of 133 miles an hour. I mean,
It's the roads which are just, I just can't believe they still race on those roads.
Yeah.
It's the speed of the bikes, Joe. you
But
know.
the speed of those bikes on a track is fine.
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
they race
But-
on those roads.
But
They're
even
not
to
fit for that
even
purpose.
to look at them on tracks frightens the life out of me on television.
But at least there
You
are
know,
runoff
the-
areas there, Dermot. There's runoff areas. There's gravel.
Yeah, but the way they're
They
fighting
can
with
slide.
the way they're fighting with gravity, I mean, they're almost at a 45-degree angle
Yeah.
to the ground,
Yeah.
and you're looking at the amount of tire between them
yeah.
and
But it's a
eternity.
different sport. It is a different sport.
Oh, I know it's a different
But
sport.
if you go
but-
down there, you slide.
it's-
Their protective gear is good.
Yeah.
They go into gravel around the Isle of Man.
oh yeah,
I can't even compute how
but
they do it.
I think it's still speed. I think speed is still the problem. I mean,
sure.
irrespective of the circuit. But anyway,
Yeah.
it is desperately
And you look
sad.
at Formula One now and how safe it is. You know, I mean, these cars are getting into now, or you know, they've got somewhere, and yet, you know, still the road racers go out, and nothing has changed.
Yeah, but yet, Paul, I mean, Nicky Lauda will tell you that nowadays it's nearly all about the mechanics of the car. I mean, whereas in his day it was about the driver.
Right.
The driver is becoming less and less important
Yeah.
In Formula One.
But the danger's been taken over as well, or
It
most
has,
of it.
yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
point.
it has, you're
Whereas
right,
for the
you're
road
right.
racers, it's still they're putting their lives on the line every time. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
Just astonishing.
It's the opening weekend of the Tour de France, and there's plenty of coverage. Ewan McKenna has interviewed Floyd Landis. Paul, you're writing about it. Eamon Sweeney is. David Walsh is. So, was it even a choice for you, by the way, to go over, or did you decide very early on in your year?
Well, I wrote a column actually in May. I'd just been sent a film that had been done on the Giro d'Italia that looked at the race from a very unusual angle. It was through the lens of the race doctors who follow it and attend all the guys who crash, and it brought home the bravery again, that word bravery in sport, and the risk these guys take and how tough they are. I mean, Jesus, there's the opening scene where the two doctors run out of the car and they come across this awful crash and the guys are just ripped to shreds.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of comment actually this week about Neymar and rolling around in agony in Russia. And they, you know, split picture with one of the guys who's just crashed in Tour de France, and he literally hasn't got a bit of skin in his body. He's just... So that brought home to me again what I love about the sport and what's great about the sport and what really makes the sport, the bravery and the courage and the toughness of these guys doing it. And I kind of thought, you know what, Jesus, maybe I'll go back. And maybe I'll go back and look at it try and look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
And then I think a couple of weeks later, there was this announcement about Froome and the adverse finding for salbutamol. And I thought, oh Jesus, no, no, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
I'm done. I'm not going near it. I got irritated this week when people were asking me about it. I understand it. It irritated the hell out of me. I have to write that column again because I've done it so many times. And, you know, it's just, excuse my French, an absolute shit show. It gets, you just, every year you think it can't get any worse, and it does. And it's just awful. It's just awful. And I've decided, you know, being... you know, I suppose selfish in a way, I'm going to come here and I'm going to enjoy myself and I'm going to, you know, write about stuff that makes me happy and that I can believe in, and I'm just going to leave that, you know, or treat that the way we treat WWF, because it's just an absolute mess, a total mess. And, you know, I met a man actually here the other night whose young sons were racing and are racing very successfully. And I could tell that they were ambitious and this is what they were looking at. And he actually was thanking me for what I've done, and it gives his son a chance now. And I didn't have the heart to say, listen, for God's sake, just try and get them to do something else. I would not encourage any kids to go and do that. It's just, and that is the tragedy of it, because, you know, it could have been changed, you know, and it still can. It still can. It still can be changed. You know, look, salbutamol, TUEs, look, sorry, no more. No TUEs. You know, you've got asthma tough, you're going to finish 145th. You're not going to win the Tour de France. You know, that's the law of nature. That's the law of sport. Let's deal with it that way. No painkillers, no nothing. Bread and water. Let's try that for a change.
Yeah. Ewan McKenna.
Zero tolerance to any substance. Zero tolerance. No excuses. You know. Let's try that. And then maybe people will actually start connecting with it again. You know,
is it possible to do that race on bread and water?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Absolutely. It is absolutely possible to do it on bread and water. I did it on one caffeine tablet and a B12 injection. You know. But what is most interesting about yesterday is, or the last couple of days, is the reaction of the crowd now to Froome. There was a clip on the BBC, I think, or the internet during the week, of Roger Federer returning to Wimbledon, and he's standing in the pavilion waiting to come out, and he walks out, and everybody is standing up, and just incredible applause, just an incredible ovation for Federer as he returns to Wimbledon. And you contrast that with what we've seen at Tour de France this week. You've got Chris Froome trying to create history by joining a very elite club of 5-time Tour de France winners. He's won the last 4. He's won the Giro d'Italia. He's won the last Vuelta. I mean, this guy, his achievements in the last 5 years have been just astonishing. And the response is what? Boos, jeers. Nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. And there's only one person to blame for that. Well, okay, that's probably a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
He can blame his team, and he can blame his own actions. His own actions from the moment he stood on that podium in 2013 when he won his first Tour and said, these are results that are going to stand the test of time. If he had actually, if those words actually meant anything to him, we would have heard about this adverse finding for some butamol from his mouth. From the moment he'd been given notice of that, he would have gone to the press and announced it immediately. Say, I don't know what's going on here. This is bullshit. Let me tell you what, you know. But from the get-go, it's like, oh, I'm an ambassador for clean cycling. And then flip side of that is you see him the next day with his arm around Alexander Vinokurov, you know, the notorious cheat. He wants it every way, and you can't have it every way. Either you're going to be transparent, either you want people to believe in you. There's a price to be paid for that, and you've got to deliver on that. And when you don't deliver on that, and when you give us, you know, when you're riding for a team that is ordering testosterone patches, that abuses the TUE system, that abuses painkillers like tramadol, when you're riding for a team like that, you can't pretend that actually, well, I'm different. Yeah, I know what these guys around me are doing, but I'm different. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And the arbiter and the ultimate response is what we've seen this week, is people boo. And what I'm going to say to you is this: those people are absolutely entitled to boo. He cannot complain about that. He's contributed to it.
Ewan McKenna has spoken to Floyd Landis, 2006 winner, subsequently stripped and turned whistleblower in 2010. He says, if you want to single out now, I think he's talking about Froome here ultimately. If you want to single out now, that's unfair as well, because the system is designed to protect the International Olympic Committee. It's all dirty, so don't point at the guy who won. I got that, they say I ruined the sport, but let me explain something to you. There is nothing anyone can say or do to harm cycling because it's a giant pile of shit. You can't make it any worse.
Yeah, that's effectively what I've just said.
But
I don't agree on that point. You can't look at the winner. You do look at the winner because everybody has a contribution to make here, including our own Irish professionals. I mean, Christ almighty, I saw an interview with Dan Martin last a couple of weeks ago where he's saying he can't comment on the Froome case because there's a clause in his contract where he's going to get. But look, you're not going to get it. You can't have it both ways. You either stand up for clean sport and express your honest views about this, or you don't. And the result is what we've seen in the last couple of days of the tour. When you don't do that, you guys get a lot of flack on off the ball for not interviewing them. And,
It's difficult to interview them and know on what premise you're doing the interview on.
Well, absolutely.
What are we assuming here?
But what you're perfectly entitled to ask them is the state of the game, and to ask them about doping in the sport and where that is now. But if they're going to come back and say, well, actually, there's a clause in my contract that says I can't discuss that. Well, I'm sorry, tough. You deserve everything you get.
Landis, it's well worth reading the Business Post, by the way,
actually,
the Landis piece. He says Ian Armstrong were put up on a pedestal and that they were the guys that we punished to protect you, is the UCI line. But he goes on to say, but I was a clean athlete when I was 19, 20, 21.
Yes.
Nobody was looking out for me. Then they change the rules, they destroy our lives, and they shout, we are protecting clean athletes.
Yeah. So the point here, Joe, is this. He was a clean athlete, but he entered the system. He saw the system and he was forced to make a choice. I cheat or I am cheated, to use his own words. Now, from the moment that he enters the system, he becomes part of the system. So he actually cannot then start pointing fingers at the IOC and all that. He's got to acknowledge that at that crossroads, if he'd stood up and said, listen, I'm now riding with Lance Armstrong, let me tell you what they're asking me to do. That's how you change things.
He does say...
That's possibly asking too much, but that's how you change things.
He does acknowledge in this piece. But as I tell the story, I'm not completely innocent. And I was conflicted, and that's part of the reason it hurt so bad. I made these decisions. I deserved some of it, but... And this maybe is where we swing back to Froome. But it seemed to me there were some inequities depending on who you were, especially as I knew Lance. I got punished, not them. So you enter the system, everybody cheats,
yeah.
But then it's a bit of a lottery, it's
yeah.
a bit of a power battle, it's a political battle as to what extent you're punished.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That must be the galling thing for the
Landises.
Landises.
Of course it is. There's one law for him and one law for Armstrong. And, as we've seen in the last couple of days, it would appear there's one law for Froome and one law for the guys who were done for taking an excess of salbutamol. And that's the frustration.
The effect this has had in his life is fairly...
Oh, yeah, there's a great...
awful.
I spent 7 hours with Floyd in New York recently, and I have a big piece to write about him. He's one guy... He's the one guy I really love. He's the one guy I really love.
So how do you reconcile that with the cheating?
It's not... I'm not looking at it. I'm not looking at it through that lens. I'm looking at him as a person. I'm looking at what this did to him, and the price he paid for it. So I'm looking at it through that lens, not, well, he cheated, so, he deserves anything he gets. Well, I'm sorry, that's kind of simplistic.
So you don't look at it that
I'm
way?
not looking at it like that. No, not at all.
Because Ewan writes here, 2 legal cases, $500,000 cost, divorce, so his marriage broke down, and then lost his best friend and father-in-law to suicide.
Yeah.
So it's destroyed his life.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, but it hasn't. It could have. But he should be dead.
He says as much. He said he took to the wilderness here and...
I saw him at that time. I mean, that he survived is just a miracle. And and this is the point. A lot of guys don't. Pantani dead.
Yeah.
Jerry Claverol, I raced with dead. There's loads of guys out there. Jimenez, great Spanish rider, dead. This is the awfulness of it. And this is when this man that I met the other night in the pub was talking to me about sending his sons to do this. I'm going, Jesus, no. Don't do it.
Because they'll have to make the choice.
They'll have to make the choice, absolutely. Which is awful.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's as bad as it was, but I don't know. I don't know. Now, can we talk about something else?
No.
Dermot, do you want to make a contribution to this?
I'm just looking at what sums it up for me. I mean, to be honest with you, Paul, sport for me is a spectacle, a visual experience.
Yeah.
All I get out of cycling is intrigue, to be honest. Like I'm reading a line here, paragraph from Ewan McKenna's piece, and he says about Landis, this isn't a story of one cheat, but of a corrupt industry. And this is the key line for me. This isn't a story about sport, but about the protection of an entertainment sector.
Yeah. And that applies to football. That applies to... I mentioned Federer. Christ almighty, let's not talk about dope testing in tennis.
Well, Eamon Sweeney touches on the fact that Serena Williams has been moaning about the testing in tennis a lot. Actually,
that was gas. That was gas. That he should do that. Or interesting, because yesterday there was an American writer called Lawson Craddock who was absolutely ripped to shreds in the open stage of the tour. And he came across the line, was attended for, and then had to go and give a dope control, be tested. And his manager, Jonathan Varda, sent out a tweet saying, "Hey, Serena Williams, you know, you're moaning about testing. Here, I've tried this. You know, you look at what happened to Lawson Craddock yesterday." So that showed the two extremes of how both sports treat their attitude to anti-doping and to testing. Well, look at the absurdity of where we are. I mean, it probably goes right down the scale to golf. The absurdity of where we are now this weekend is that we're going to have a podium here